towards him, but the young man knew clearly that if he wanted to save his life this time, he must avoid any contact with this flight attendant. But remembering how the flight attendant had thoughtfully fastened his seatbelt and gently helped him change into slippers in his previous life, the young man's heart softened. He truly didn't want to watch the flight attendant get murdered, but he deliberately kept his distance from her. No matter how much the flight attendant tried to advance, he coldly rejected her. Seeing the flight attendant still hovering around him, he shamelessly asked her if she was in love with him. The flight attendant frankly admitted that she did find the young man quite nice, a remark that completely irritated the young man. But he suddenly remembered the mate criteria the flight attendant had mentioned when she rejected his friend at the airport. He immediately said he wasn't 1.9 meters tall, but the flight attendant insisted she was around 1.9 meters tall, and that a difference of 30 centimeters would be fine. The young man then said he was a playboy and had had more than 10 girlfriends, but the flight attendant contradicted her earlier statement, saying that men with multiple relationships tend to be more mature, which would complement her perfectly. The young man was speechless, but he really didn't want to have anything to do with the woman in front of him, so he asked the flight attendant if he preferred sweet or savory apple pie. The flight attendant immediately replied that sweet ones were better. The young man immediately said he preferred savory ones, saying their tastes were too different. He and she weren't suitable. Seeing the young man's disdain for her, the stewardess, feeling hurt, wisely turned and left. But thinking of her subsequent tragic death, the young man couldn't bear it anymore and grabbed the stewardess, adding her contact information. He knew that at this point, only by continuing to stay close to the stewardess, as he had in his previous life, could he find the true murderer. After the plane landed, his friends heard that he had added the stewardess's contact information and were filled with envy. A group of them even started to fight over her affections. The young man concluded that the murderer was one of these people. That evening, the young man texted the flight attendant his location, just as he had in his previous life. Not long after, the flight attendant arrived at room 22. Just as she was about to push him down, he stood up and confessed to the flight attendant, saying he wasn't rich and had redeemed his first-class cabin with points. The flight attendant wasn't angry, however. She explained that the crew knew he'd redeemed his points for the ticket, and that she wasn't short of money. Then, the flight attendant pulled a lottery ticket from behind her and told him she'd been incredibly lucky the past 2 days and had won a $5 million jackpot. The young man then realized there was a hidden story behind the flight attendant's death. Facing such a pure and innocent girl, he couldn't let her die. So, he told the flight attendant that she would die in this room tomorrow. The flight attendant thought the young man was playing a trick on her and angrily turned to leave. The young man quickly stopped her. To prove his truth, he revealed a few of the flight attendant's secrets. These were the flight attendant's own words from her previous life. Seeing the young man's accurate disclosure of her secrets, the flight attendant finally began to believe him. He told her that the murderer likely knew the flight attendant had won 5 million yuan and was probably a friend traveling with him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have deliberately framed the young man. But the young man couldn't understand why his face appeared on the surveillance video. To clarify this question, he took out another phone and placed it in a flower pot as a surveillance camera. He then took the flight attendant to a room next door. To be on the safe side, they didn't drink the water in the room or order takeout. They simply waited quietly for their prey to appear. To create the illusion that someone was inside, he even recorded his conversation with the flight attendant. After everything was ready, the young man sat on the bed with the flight attendant in his arms, quietly watching the surveillance video. It was soon late at night, and just as the young man and the flight attendant were about to fall asleep, the door of room 22 in the surveillance video suddenly opened.